I guess you find yourself competing directly with companies who have raised an obscene amount of money, and there you are doing your thing, bootstrapped. What was going through your head at the time?
We saw these players come in with insane amounts of capital and really dominate the space.
And you decided to bootstrap the business. Why was that?
I think the reality was the previous business that we were involved in had raised a lot of venture money. And at least in my opinion, it had destroyed the business. And I was bruised from that. And so I felt that if we were good at what we did, people would buy what we had. And we didn't need money, external capital to do that. We were going to build our own products, and if the market would tell us if it was right or not. We were very proud of what we built, and then we took it to market, and it turned out that no one cared. And I think, again, lessons learned there. I think we perhaps could have made a lot of money earlier on, and I felt that there was a big opportunity to do something a lot greater. And having that visibility of how 50,000 different Salesforce orgs were operating gave us an incredible insight as to where the problems lied. And that was our first step into kind of machine learning. And just looking at this huge volume of data and understanding what engagement was leading to revenue. It was like turning a television from black and white to color. Go-to-market is changing even now. In fact, for me, I think go-to-market is going to be transforming itself over the next 3 years in a way that we've not seen before. And the truth is that while you and I have both got decades of experience in go-to-market, none of us have sold in 2026 before.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Heresy Podcast. My name is Dimitar, and on this episode, I'm joined by my good friend, Guy Rubin, the founder and CEO of Ebsta. Many of you probably know Ebsta. Ebsta is a London-based revenue intelligence platform used by thousands of go-to-market teams globally. Guy founded the company over a decade ago, bootstrapped it, and turned it into an industry leader. And just a few weeks ago, Ebsta was acquired by Fullcast. So in this episode, we talk about Guy's journey, bootstrapping the company, having to compete with incredibly well-funded US firms, and all the lessons learned along the way. In the second part of the conversation, Guy and I dig deep into the latest B2B SaaS sales benchmark reports, what makes the best performing AEs so good and why the delta between them and everyone else keeps on increasing, what are the best performing channels nowadays in terms of go-to-market, what the role of artificial intelligence is in the sales process, and what go-to-market will look like in 2025 and beyond. Enjoy. Welcome to the podcast, Guy. Great to sit down with you. It's been a minute. I have not seen you in a while, so it's great to be able to spend an hour and a bit with you. But just before we get going, maybe a quick introduction would make sense for anyone who has not met you. You are the founder and CEO of Ebsta, which is a really well-known company in the UK, but dare I say globally now. And you just had Ebsta acquired, just announced last month, correct?
That's right, yeah, that's right.
What does Ebsta do?
Well, we started in 2012, and originally we set ourselves out to address the problem of data hygiene in Salesforce. Every company we knew that was using Salesforce had a problem with the quality and the currency of the data in the system of record. So we thought we'd spend 6 months and try and fix that problem.
Yeah.
It took us about 3 years to build that. And when we finally announced, look, we've built this thing, and we're able to use traffic in siloed data sources around your business, things like your mailboxes, your calendars, your phone systems, to go back and clean all the historical records in Salesforce and give you an engine that will keep it up to date so the sellers don't have to do it themselves. We were very proud of what we built, and then we took it to market, and it turned out that no one cared.
Oh,
so
not build it and they would come. It didn't.
Well, that was the theory, right?
Yeah,
and
right.
and I think that was one of the very many lessons I've learned along the way, right? So what we found was that everyone had that problem, but it was a 7 out of 10 problem,
Right.
and in reality, people are spending their lives fixing 11 out of 10 problems.
Ooh.
And so while we did okay, and we sold some good licenses and took on some clients, but it was a slog. And then really the penny dropped that when we looked at the data, the opportunities that the customers were working on, where there was more activity, where there was more engagement, where they were more multi-threaded, those were the deals that were closing as one.
Right.
So that took us on this journey around what we call revenue intelligence. So we built our second product, which is all around forecasting and pipeline inspection tools. And really, our USP was that we had an engine that was that was fixing the data that was building the benchmarks.
Yeah.
So the challenge a lot of businesses have around having accurate forecasting is they're still relying on things like weighted forecasts based on stages.
Yeah.
And the reality is that every deal isn't equal. So if you're more multi-threaded, if you've got the right stakeholders involved, if there's momentum in the opportunity, if you understand what the critical event might be, if you have slippage, that can have a negative impact. And all of these things aren't necessarily considered when you're looking at a weighted forecast. And so you're never going to get to an accurate number. Yeah. So the challenge that our competitors have is that the benchmarks they build are based on the data that happens to be in Salesforce that really probably only got there because the sellers put it in there manually. So by going through this exercise of fixing the historical data, we're uniquely placed to build out these benchmarks.
Yeah.
And that tells us what good looks like for every sales motion they have within the business.
Yeah.
Once we understand what good looks like, we're then at the races. Now we can start prompting the B players as to what they should do to follow the A player standards. And all of a sudden, you start to introduce consistency. And the thing that makes this work is that all the sellers want to win. And so they've all got their own narrative as to why their way of doing things works.
Yeah.
But then when you turn it into pictures and you show them, look, you've got a win rate of 12%, but if you were to engage with the CFO in stage 2 instead of stage 4, and if you were to be this multi-threaded or have this type of motion, your win rate could be 38%.
Yeah. I hear you. And I have got lots of questions around this because I know you've got a lot of insights based on the research that you guys do. But before we even go there, I wanted to kind of rewind it back to 2012 when you started Ebsta. And first of all, what prompted you to start your own business, right? There's like two types of entrepreneurs, I would say. Those who are incredibly passionate about a specific idea and they just, that's their life's work and they have to go and build it. And there are others who can just not work for anyone else. They have to be their own boss. And maybe there's something in between, right? I always wondered which kind of archetype are you? What prompted you to start your own business?
I've probably been both over the years at different times. I'd say I'm passionate about data and I'm a sales geek. So right. I enjoy everything to do. I spend a lot of time learning about sales and different techniques and how people go about that job.
Yeah.
So I consider myself a student of that. And I just enjoy, and I love playing with data. So when you bring those two together, you can achieve some really special things. And again, that was really my focus at the time. I think over that period, I probably had times where I'd probably be a very bad employee.
Right.
But I think, as you grow up and you realize, actually you need to handle yourself. It doesn't really matter, who's paying the bills. What matters is how you perform and how you interact with your team. And ultimately we all have someone we report to, even if you're the CEO, right? We've still got to report
to your customers in a way, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So ultimately that's all that matters. I consider myself an enthusiast on the space.
Yeah.
And that's probably what drives me.
Was it always, so the plan was, and you kind of mentioned it a bit earlier, the plan was always to go in the sort of broader GTM space, kind of sales technology, right?
Well, my previous company was recruitment tech, and again, what we did there was look at the resumes that people were receiving. It was just at the point where the internet was kicking in, so 2000, and people had gone from faxing their resumes through to sending them via email, and suddenly recruitment businesses were inundated with vast volumes of resumes that were in an unstructured format. So we went about, we built a business that would turn those into structured records in the CRM. And, in hindsight, we probably could have built, we were 3 years earlier than LinkedIn, and we were building structured profiles for candidates looking for jobs. So while the idea was great, I think in hindsight, we could have executed as a LinkedIn rather than as a software vendor for recruitment companies.
Yeah.
But lots of lessons learned, met some great people, and we were part of that business for about 8 years.
Yeah. Did you go straight into Ebsta from that business?
No, we did we had a period of non-competes and we did some consulting around that time. And then eventually we set up Ebsta.
And again, I can't remember if you just said that It's a bit early for me, but was Ebsta the original idea, a problem that you experienced in the previous businesses set up, and you were like, okay, I need to go and fix this? Is that how it worked? Or?
Well, again, for recruiters, it was how do I structure all these resumes of people? How do I structure these people profiles in a system that I can then manage?
Yeah.
What became apparent is that it wasn't a recruitment specific issue, and there's a much wider market out there.
Right.
When we were living in the recruitment sector, it felt like it was our whole world, our whole universe, and we thought it was a big market. Then you step out of that and you enter, and someone, a mentor of mine, introduced me to the Salesforce ecosystem. And as I was telling them all the things we're doing in recruitment, he said, well, you have no idea how big this market really is.
Yeah.
And he had to almost shake me into kind of, you need to have a look at this Salesforce ecosystem thing. And we're talking about kind of 2010, 2011.
Yep.
And suddenly it became and kind of what hit me, I think as humans, we really struggle with understanding scale. If an industry's big, well, it's big. And is there really any difference between, this size big or that size big? It's all just big. What became apparent is that the Salesforce ecosystem is really vast, and the sales in itself, B2B sales, is a huge market. And the first product we built for the Salesforce ecosystem was basically email integration for Salesforce.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds crazy, but in 2010 there wasn't any email integration for Salesforce. We were one of two vendors that were doing it, and we had no marketing budget. We built this little product, and we needed to get it out to the market. So we decided to go with a freemium model. And we got...
Well, you were early, right?
We were really early. Yeah, really early.
Freemium was not that common.
Not at all. And so we were doing freemium that no one else had done. And we were one of two vendors that was integrating email with Salesforce. And you won't be surprised to hear that most companies that use Salesforce also happen to use email. So finding a simple way of doing that and an intuitive way worked, and with being freemium, we ended up with just over 50,000 businesses using that product.
Oh wow!
Which sounds great, and we were very excited to watch every morning. You kind of come in and you see about 100 companies a day and installing this thing, and it was all product-led growth before product-led growth was a thing. And arguably, we could have evolved that business into a SalesLoft or an Outreach. Again, another decision made.
I'm going to ask you about this. Don't you worry.
But the ecosystem around us changed. Our relationship with Salesforce, suddenly we got a phone call from Salesforce. I got a phone call. I was actually in San Francisco at the time, and I got a phone call from Salesforce. And they were explaining that they have 4,000 apps on their App Exchange, and we're using their API more than the other 3,999, and we're not paying them any money. And that wasn't a sustainable model for them.
I see where this is going.
So yeah, they shut down our freemium model and effectively launched their own free email integration for Salesforce product. So that was a real moment in time for us.
Yeah.
And that took us on this journey to look at the data in a bit more detail. So integrating the emails was one thing, but could we then find the contacts out of those emails?
So all of this is taking place around 2012, 2013, 2014, I presume.
Yeah, I think that the business model changed in probably 2015, 2016.
But this is literally big Silicon Roundabout where, big venture rounds are being closed here. A lot of companies are popping up. And yet you chose to go the route less traveled, right? And you decided to bootstrap the business. Why was that? Did you try to raise at the time and it was just not happening? Or did you decide, with 50,000 users or companies, a lot more users, we can basically make this work. What was the thinking at the time?
I'd like to tell you it was a strategic, conscious decision, and we knew it was we'd do it our own way. I think the reality was the previous business that we were involved in had raised a lot of venture money, and at least in my opinion, it had destroyed the business. And I'd been involved in a number of businesses or seen a number of companies that where venture money had come in and ruined the business, and I was bruised from that, and so I felt that if we were good at what we did, people would buy what we had, and we didn't need money, external capital to do that. We were going to build our own products, and if the market would tell us if it was right or not. And for a period, we were on top of that, and we did really well. And again, I think in hindsight, maybe we should have taken on money, maybe we could have done something different, and perhaps we could have gone in a different direction. But sales cadences and email tracking tools and sales enablement tools wasn't really where my passion was. And I think, again, lessons learned there. I think we perhaps could have made a lot of money earlier on if we'd followed that journey. But I was much more interested in the data, and I felt that there was a big opportunity to do something a lot greater. And having that visibility of how 50,000 different Salesforce orgs were operating gave us an incredible insight as to where the problems lied. And it was all around go-to-market. So we decided to double down and focus on evolving. So the first thing we did was we developed what we call our engagement score, or the Ebsta score, which is a number out of 100 that tells you how strong a relationship is, and if it's trending up or down over time, you can see that number tracking. And that was our first step into kind of machine learning.
Yep.
And just looking at this huge volume of data and understanding what engagement was leading to revenue. Really, it was like turning a television from black and white to color. Wow. And suddenly we had this huge kind of data set, which we had the rights to at least look at from an anonymized perspective. And it really just changed our world. And it got me very excited about the idea of using data to drive consistency in that go-to-market motion.
Yeah.
And understanding what relationships drive revenue, or first of all, understanding that relationships do drive revenue. And we had the absolute evidence to suggest that. It was something that we felt we'd discovered that others perhaps weren't. People maybe knew in their gut, but they didn't necessarily have the evidence behind it.
Yeah, I think what's really unique about, well, I think what's been very unique about Ebsta is that you've been actually able to quantify what I just said, right? Because I think intuitively everyone knows that relationships drive sales, but being able to quantify it, it's a whole different ballgame altogether.
Exactly that, right? So if you know that you need an engagement score above 67 with a CFO before you leave stage 2 to maximize your chance for win rate, you just don't allow the sellers to leave stage 2 unless they've achieved an engagement score of 67 with a finance persona, right?
Yeah.
And so when you're able to articulate it at that granular level and you can show the seller the evidence in kind of picture format, there's no arguing. And all of a sudden that overriding drive to win overtakes the ego, telling them that they know what they're doing and now they want to follow best practice.
Yeah.
And when you combine that with taking away all the admin from the sellers, all of a sudden it's a no-brainer. And you're able to free up their time and they can focus more of their time on the things that matter, which is building relationships, running sales processes, and closing business. Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier the likes of Sales Loft and Outreach. So going from our starting point in 2012, you're running the business, you're doing well, and around 13 to 15, I would say, all these companies start popping up in the US, right? So Sales Loft first, and then you've got Outreach, Gong, Clarity, Drift, and combined they raise, I don't know, like north of 1.5 billion, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Maybe 2, I don't even know the exact numbers, but a ridiculous amount of money. And a lot of them actually end up opening offices either in Dublin or a few of them here in London.
Yeah.
And I guess you find yourself competing directly with companies who have raised an obscene amount of money, and there you are doing your thing, bootstrapped. What's going through your head at the time?
Yeah, I think it felt, it was certainly overwhelming for a period, and we needed to figure out what we were going to do differently. And so I think what we decided was that we were going to focus on what we were good at and let other people do whatever they want to do, right? So you can only control the controllables.
Yeah.
And yes, I think we saw these players come in with insane amounts of capital and really dominate the space. So we try to lean into our expertise and our area of focus, and also our strengths. The big boys are great at what they do. They're very good at they can do their own go-to-market. I mean, they're selling go-to-market tools, right? So they've got to be good at it. But what they're very good at is selling licenses. And what we wanted to do was deliver real value. And that was our North Star. We felt we had an opportunity to directly influence the number of sellers that could hit quota.
Yeah.
And everyone else is selling licenses, and we're out there promising to increase quota attainment across the sellers and get the forecast more accurate for the leadership team. And we introduced a guarantee around that.
Yeah.
And that in itself helped us to kind of differentiate from the sellers that are out there selling licenses of tech.
Can you tell us a bit more about the guarantee? I thought that was very cool when you did it, by the way. Only business I know that has actually done it, at least in the GTM space, right?
Yeah. So if we fast forward to where we are now, we kind of have three, or before we were acquired at least, there were really three components to what made up Ebsta. So you've got this underlying data lake element where we're basically turning unstructured data that's sitting in silos in your mailboxes, your calendars, your phone systems, your call recorders, your CRM, and we're turning that into a single source of truth. So we now understanding what stakeholders and how much engagement is required at every stage of every sales cycle to achieve a certain outcome, and that applies just as much on the success side as well. And we can talk about some of the data around that a little bit later.
Yeah.
And so we start from a place of good quality, consistent, maintained, up-to-date data that's not reliant on what the sellers are doing. Then on top of that, we've got the tech, right? So you need to achieve the consistent growth that we provide our customers, you need four things. You need good quality, consistent, maintained data. You need to convert that data into insights that everyone buys into. There's no question the insights are correct. It doesn't matter if you're in sales, marketing, success, RevOps, the leadership team, the board, everyone is reading from the same data source. And the insights themselves, everyone buys into the insights being consistent and correct because the data that underpins it is being managed by an independent and not humans. Okay. So you've got to have good data, and then you've got to convert that data into insights that everyone understands and buys into. Then you need a technology platform. You need something to hold everything together. You need a process driven by some sort of tech. And then you need a change agent.
Yeah.
And so what we wanted to do was deliver that whole experience for the seller. Now, on the change agent side, we introduced what we call RIAS, and it's quite a new product for us. So RIAS is Revenue Insights as a Service.
Oh, okay.
Now, what we found was there are so many data points. I mean, you've seen our reports, right?
I have.
We have so much data and so many insights for our customers, and it all sits within our platform that's inside Salesforce. What we found was, as we were selling to more and more mid-market companies, the C-suite don't open up Salesforce.
Huh.
So you're delivering all this value, all of these insights, and showing them, signposting what they need to do better. And the C-suite just weren't aware of these insights. They weren't digesting them in a format that would work for them.
Yeah.
So we built an engine that would extract these insights, add a bit more color to them, and deliver them back every quarter to the leadership team as a service. So I would sit with the leadership team of all of these, 100 million ARR businesses, and I'd walk them through the data, showing them what are they doing well, what's improved since last quarter, and what needs attention for the next quarter. And by doing that, they understand what they need to focus their energies on to get that consistency in place. Because what we see in the data is that you've got just 14% of sellers now generating 80% of new logo revenue.
Yeah.
And that in itself is just not
It's
sustainable.
mind-blowing, yeah.
It's crazy.
Would you say, this is an interesting point you make, so I appreciate that the C-suite might not live in Salesforce. We can argue whether that's right or wrong. But would you say the impact came from you personally presenting those reports, or was it just the format changing? Or is it a combination of the two? I always wondered, because obviously you're very charismatic, you speak a lot, you travel the world literally and present these numbers. And I wonder, where does at what point does the penny drop? Is it when Guy stands in front of you and tells you what the latest data is, or is it literally a matter of, hey, here's a report that you can look at, and it doesn't have to be in Salesforce? I
think the thing that makes it different is the way it's delivered. So I think, and it's not necessarily me, it's more about we found pictures work a lot better than words. So if you look at any of our slide decks or any of the content in our graphics in our reports, you can kind of you can look at it in 5 seconds and take away the information you need from it. And so that delivery mechanism, I think a lot of people forget that the majority of people in sales don't necessarily have a university degree.
Right.
They don't necessarily understand the analytics and the data behind this stuff. And so, or if they do, it's going to take a lot of brain work to get there. And so if you can deliver that information in a format that they can digest and make it super easy to get the takeaway from the data, we found that's when the penny drops.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing about doing it in this format is it's not just useful for the leadership team, but they're able to take these graphics and take them into their board. They're able to take these graphics and give them to the sales leaders. Even the individual contributors are able to take away what they need to do from looking at the data in that format. So by simplifying things down and giving them a narrative that works, that they can digest, we found that it changes the game.
Nice. So going back to our little time frame here, 2015, all of these companies come to London. They have raised, as I said, combined north of 1.5 billion. You're still bootstrapping it. Eventually, it did raise a small round. Am I right in saying that? Or
we raised some angel money.
What changed? Like, why was it the pressure that you were experiencing from the likes of SalesLoft and Outreach and Clary, I guess, who were directly in your space in a way, or was it something on your side where you thought?
We wanted to take that pivot, right? So we'd had this big change from Salesforce in the way we were doing the product that we'd taken to market as freemium wasn't available anymore, and we had a clear vision of what we wanted to do with the data. We wanted to go on this journey and become a revenue intelligence platform, and we were going to need capital to do that. So we raised a little bit of money through friends and family and through angel networks, but crucially, there wasn't a PE or a VC involved in that. So. That was again, was that the right decision or not? We can spend a lot of time looking at that as well.
What's your take? Looking back now, obviously, you just had the company acquired, so kind of removing yourself as much as you can. I know you're still very much in it, but looking back on that decision to raise money, would you say it was the right one? Would you, if you could do it all over again, would you have raised money right from the get-go? Maybe.
I don't think it's about the raise where the challenges stood. I think the issue was more around being ready for the money. I think we should have made a lot more. We had a lot of legacy people in the business that had been with us for a very long time, and we didn't make any major changes to that team, that leadership team, when we raised the money. And in hindsight, we probably should have done.
Yeah.
And we ended up making those changes about 3 years later, when all the money had been spent. Look, lessons learned as you go. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer on this stuff, but I would say that we perhaps could have put a stronger board in place at the time. We probably could have, probably should have upgraded the leadership team that was running the business at the time as well. But again, you're right in the middle of the thick of it, and you're talking about 2019, 2020. So there's a lot of money flushing around, some nice valuations.
Well, that's why I'm asking. I thought you must have been tempted, especially with this, we obviously hit peak in 2021 valuation wise, but you could see the trajectory at which things were going. I wonder, you must have been thinking, gosh, we should probably take some money as well. $1 billion valuation sounds great, doesn't it?
Yeah, again, for me, it was a control thing. I at the time felt that I knew what I was doing, and I was the right person to run the business, and I wanted to maintain that level of control. And so angel money was available. We took it on. I think in hindsight, again, perhaps what I've learned over the last few years is that the VCs and the PEs do a lot more than just put money into businesses. They give you some structure, and again, for those that are listening in today, go-to-market is changing even now. In fact, for me, I think go-to-market is going to be transforming itself over the next 3 years in a way that we've not seen before. And the truth is that while you and I have both got decades of experience in go-to-market, none of us have sold in 2026 before. And until none of us know really what that looks like.
No one does, right?
No one does. And so it's very exciting because it's going to change. And having people around you that can help to navigate that next step in the business and would have been the right thing to do. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about this change. I think you're kind of very much part of it now. So one of the big trends that we saw kind of starting around the time you founded Ebsta was the unbundling of the monolithic CRM providers like Salesforce and the Cisco's, etc., into smaller, very niche players who created these best-in-class software companies like Drift and Outreach, yourselves, etc. And now we're kind of doing the complete opposite. There's a big consolidation. Obviously, Vista acquired Sales Loft in 22. Then Sales Loft acquired Drift, or they merged. Then Clarion Sales Loft merged, and obviously your story comes into play here. Fullcast acquired Ebsta, Atrium, and Commissionly to create quite a serious company here to compete, I suppose, with the Vista side of the house. Not to mention that you've got Gong still operating independently and Outreach. So what's your take on all of this? Obviously, we're seeing this consolidation in real time. Why is this happening? What's your take?
Well, I think there's a number of different things happening at the same time. These very large organizations have got ridiculously high valuations, and the reality is they're probably worth 20% of their last round valuation. And so if I was part of that leadership team, that's a tough ask, right? So, if your last valuation was 6 billion and really you're only worth 600 million, right? You've got a long way to go before you start seeing upside on your share options, right? And I think that's a real problem for a lot of these businesses, and for them to maintain the talent at the top of their business, they need to find ways of incentivizing that team. I think by consolidating businesses, there's ways of restructuring cap tables and valuations, and I think it's been the way of kind of giving the shareholders a bit of a softer landing on those challenges. So I think there's a lot of that going on at the moment, and I think I also think that the other thing is about these businesses is they're not growing anymore.
Yeah.
And when businesses achieve those ridiculously high valuations because of they're achieving exponential growth. As soon as that exponential growth stops, those valuations disappear.
Yeah.
And they take for granted almost that they had that exponential growth, but it's not that easy to replicate. And in my opinion, we're going to see a whole swathe of new go-to-market tech vendors in the market that might even eat the lunch of these perhaps traditional vendors.
Is this where we start talking about AI? I mean, it's been like 40 minutes into the conversation or something like that. We have not mentioned AI now. So is this probably the right time to mention it? 2025, everyone is thinking implementing some sort of AI tool, especially on the go-to-market side of the house. Is this what you meant when you said there will be new players in the space who would eat the incumbents' lunch?
I think so. Look, what AI effectively means for go-to-market tech is the barrier to build product has disappeared. You can sit in your bedroom and build some really good tech in 3 months and take it to market relatively quickly. So I don't think we've landed on what the future tech stack looks like yet.
Yeah.
But I also think there's a lot of AI tech out there that's almost great, that is can be a big distraction for a lot of sales teams. So we're not there yet on what AI is going to deliver go to market, and it's great that most commercial people tend to be relatively good at being early adopters of things, and we love playing with these tools, and they're helping us with certain efficiencies here and there, but we haven't seen yet what AI is going to be able to do for go to market, and I'm very excited by that. But in a way, while the barriers to actually building these things has started to drop dramatically, the ability to take that to market and win the space, that the cost of that has gone up dramatically. So frankly, looking at the market from my perspective, recognizing the fact that the technology that go-to-market teams are using today is going to be a world of difference in 3 years' time, and thinking about the energy required to rebuild from the ground up the future of go-to-market onto a platform, was going to take, and then to take that to market, we were going to need to be part of something bigger. Yeah.
So is this where you feel companies like Fullcast, who ended up buying Ebsta, and as I mentioned, Atrium and Commissionly, have the upper hand in the sense that they're consolidating the best of each in each vertical? You can argue that you're the best company, and so they're consolidating it to create this single product that can deliver on all fronts. Is this where you think you have the upper hand, or how do you see the competition kind of panning out? Again, I'm curious on your take. Who are the losers? Who are the winners of this space?
Well, it's still early to tell. I can tell you what excited me about Fullcast. It's probably a good place to start, right? So it's worth understanding. There's a Fullcast was there's a founding set of leadership within the team, and those founders set up, grew, and exited a business called Simplus, which was an SI in the Salesforce ecosystem. They took that business public, made a lot of money from that, and they could have just retired and that would have been the end of that.
Yeah.
They decided that they wanted to go again, and as a leadership team, they put their money together and then raised some additional capital, and then that's what they used to then acquire Fullcast. So Fullcast was set up originally by a CTO called Bala. And Bala was working at Salesforce, and they had a real challenge around territory planning and management.
Yeah.
So you can imagine going back 10 years now. So Salesforce was kind of where OpenAI is now, right? Exponential growth, selling in every geography, every vertical, every market. And they had thousands and thousands of sellers around the world, and managing territories was a real challenge. Spreadsheets all over the place, and really not quite sure, not being able to have complete visibility of where the opportunities lied, and the ability to have that dynamic approach to throwing additional resources at markets or segments that had capacity and taking resources away from markets that were perhaps slowing. And it was costing Salesforce a lot of money. So Bala went on this journey to build out territory planning for Salesforce themselves. And then he was so passionate about the space, and he could see that it was such a broken part of the market, that he set up what's now known as Fullcast. The leadership team that I mentioned before that came from Simplus were early investors in Fullcast. And once they saw that product mature and evolve and could see the opportunity in front of them, they acquired the business.
Gotcha. I didn't realize Fullcast was an acquired company in its own right.
Yeah. And what blew me away I've known this leadership team now for the last, say, 3 years, and they are an incredible group of people. Yeah. Really, just the opportunity to work with the CEO, a chap called Ryan Westwood, was really a dream come true for me. Yeah. We spend our time with our peers, and I'd like to think I can hold my own in most board meetings, but the opportunity to work with Ryan has been an incredible learning curve, and it feels like I've gone back to school.
That's awesome,
and it really is. And the clarity of vision, the clarity around how everything needs to work to scale, is incredible to watch. Yeah. I thought we were quite organized as a business. And then as they came in and did their diligence before they acquired us, you realize that, there's just a different way of running these things. Right. There's playbooks for everything. There's a process that's already been established for every process you can imagine. Yeah. And at the same time, they're humble and also very open to learning as well. So obviously, there are certain parts of the puzzle that we know better than anyone else because it's what we've been doing. And what's really exciting is that they are, while they've achieved a lot and they've got a very clear vision, they want to win this revenue space. They want to become the revenue platform for revenue leaders, and that's everything from territory management and planning, through to pipeline inspections and forecasting tools, all the way through to commissions and payments. Yeah. And the vision is to deliver a single platform for all of the above. And I've never met a leadership team like it. And I believe in the vision, and that's why when there were 2 or 3 other companies sniffing around and through that process, it was really the Fullcast team that got us most excited about the future.
So it was all about the team in this particular case?
It was all about the team, 100% about the team.
What kind of advice would you give to anyone else who was in your boots, like say a year, 6 months ago? I don't know how long the process took. What would be, so again, first time selling, is it the first time selling a company?
Yes. I mean, I've been involved in 2 other exits, but this is the first business I founded that we've sold. Yeah.
So what, again, lots to learn, I presume, and a lot more coming by the sound of things, but what are sort of the top lessons that you took away from this whole experience?
Look, I think it depends on what you want to do, right? So, I'm still in my mid-40s, believe it or not, even with the grey hair. I'm not done yet. And I want to win this space. I think the realization that I wasn't going to be able to do that alone was kind of the first step. And then you go, okay, well, what are the options? And look, if you're selling a business and you're going to walk away and go and sit on a beach, then really all that matters is you're selling it to the highest bidder, I suppose. But that wasn't where we sat. From our perspective, we felt that the job isn't done yet, and we wanted to accelerate both our learning, but also our ability to win. And another uncomfortable truth is that all roads lead to America. That's where all the money is. It's where all the customers are. And while there's money to be made in Europe, we're a London-based business. We have no resources in the US, and still 60% of our customers are in North America.
Yeah.
Right. So and what we've seen over the last few years is America is accelerating away from Europe. So it's not that Europe is slowing down, but the speed in which America is progressing and growing is just in awe to watch.
What would you attribute that to? Obviously, we've been spending a lot of time in the US, especially in recent months with the acquisition, but historically you spend a lot of time in the US anyway. So what would you attribute this acceleration? And that's true. I think kind of one of the earliest signs of that acceleration was you could start seeing a big delta between executive pay in the GTM space, but throughout, not just GTM here and in the US, which has only continued to widen. But now the space itself is just miles ahead. So why is that happening? What would you say is different about the US? What are we not doing right, or something that they're doing really well that we're not doing here? Why is that happening?
They understand the game better than we do. We get so tied up thinking about how things should be, while they just focus on how things are,
right,
and how to win in that based on the fact that things are the way they are.
Yeah.
So they're not tied up with. I suppose we have a lot of, I don't know. I wonder if maybe we've got a little bit lazy in our approach, and we get very we think a lot about the way things should be, or we. Maybe I should start that answer again.
Absolutely up to you.
The Americans aren't afraid to fail.
Right.
Okay. So, and in fact, if you have a failure on your resume, or if things didn't work out in a certain way, it's almost a badge of honor.
Right.
In America, and there's an enthusiasm to just try new things and to push forward at all costs. We spend a lot of time procrastinating here in Europe, a lot of time thinking about what could be and what options we might decide to take. The Americans are not afraid to fail, and they're quite happy to, and they run a lot faster than we do.
Yeah.
They don't have as much red tape, and there's. They understand how the game works, and it's not about whether it's right or wrong. It's just about the reality of the way the commercial world operates, and they just understand those rules better than we do.
Yeah. And
we spend far too much time thinking about the way it should be, rather than just getting on with what's in front of us and taking advantage of opportunities that are there. I definitely believe the business would have been in a different size and shape if we happened to be based in San Francisco rather than London.
Yeah. Would you? So I had Ali Mitchell on the podcast. Ali started a company a little bit earlier than you, called Huddle, which was one of the OGs of the Silicon Roundabout. At the time, they raised one of the biggest, if not the biggest, venture rounds. Took the company to the US. They actually relocated their HQ there. They ended up losing to Box and Dropbox, I suppose, and maybe even Google. And we had a very interesting conversation. His take on all this is that if you want to build a global business, you basically have to start it in the US. So even if you're a very talented and ambitious founder in the UK, you've got two options. You either focus on absolutely dominating the market here and then capture 100% of it or close to 100%. And then when a big US company starts thinking of expansion, they have no other option but acquire you, or you don't even work in Europe. You basically go and start the company in the US. Does this resonate with you? Is that how you're thinking based on what you've been through?
Yeah, I think it depends what you're trying to achieve, right? If you want to build a nice lifestyle business, I'm sure there's all sorts of ways of doing that. But if you really want to win a space, you have to be in America, and all of the customers are there, all of the opportunity. It's just so much greater. And again, as humans, we really struggle understanding scale. But there is so much opportunity in the States. I'm there probably once a month. I'm heading to DC for the Pavilion GTM kickoff in a couple of weeks, and then of course it's Dreamforce in October. So I'll be out in San Francisco for that as well. So and we were just in Utah announcing the acquisition. So we're there quite a lot. Try and use our time as efficiently as we can when we're there. But yes, the whole market is very US centric.
Yeah. Oh, good old Europe. Cool. Let's zoom in a little bit on one of my favorite topic, and clearly yours. Start geeking out about numbers a little bit. You had the latest B2B SaaS sales benchmark report released. When was that?
Well, we launched the big report every year in February. And then we do
the refresh.
Yeah, so the H1 update is coming out for the GTM event. So I've been knee deep in all the data over the last couple of weeks. We're going to be launching that officially at the end of September at the Pavilion GTM event. And then we did an extra chapter around qualification, and that was about 6 weeks ago. And that was really just diving into the value and the importance of qualification and why you need to do it consistently and correctly.
Well, I think this is the one I got my hands on, the one you shared with me. And one thing that stood out right away is, in engineering, we have been talking about 10x engineers for a very long time, people who are able to deliver 10x the output compared to other developers. The thing that stood out for me in this report is that I think now we're kind of at the stage in GTM where we're seeing 10x. I think in your case, it was actually 11x salespeople. So performers who are basically driving revenue at 11x higher number than anyone else in the organization, right? You mentioned this stat earlier. I think you said 14% of all sellers deliver 80% of the revenue, right? So there's a big disparity in performance. One thing I wanted to ask you, I suppose, is what's behind this? What is driving the delta between the best and the rest? That sounded a bit corny, but you know what I mean, right? Is it behavioral? Is it like a methodology? Is it something else?
First of all, it's all of the above, and let me just really clarify a couple of those data points. I spend a lot of time talking about sales efficiency, okay, and the efficiency is made up of there's a simple calculator. Maybe we can share it with the guests afterwards, and we'll give you a link to it. But it's really about it's a great data point to use when you're comparing different sellers selling different products to different markets, because it distills it down to effectively dollars per day. Okay, and it helps us understand how efficient or how profitable a particular go-to-market motion might be, or a particular seller, or a particular geography or market, and so distilling our sales cycles down to dollars per day, it helps you understand. You might think that the big deals are the ones that make us the most money, but actually, when you look at the data, we're closing the medium-sized deals a whole lot quicker, and it's a lot more profitable for us, for example. So, understanding the efficiency of your go-to-market motions or the different go-to-market motions is absolutely key. There's a simple calculator which we'll share with the group afterwards. That the velocity delta that you're talking about is that efficiency delta. So what that's comparing is the top performing sellers within our organizations and the average sellers. Okay. Now, every year for the last 4 years, we've seen that number grow. The delta get wider. Okay. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. So first of all, I think this year perhaps the numbers are even slightly outsized or slightly skewed, because last year we churned so much of our sales teams, and so this year we've had to hire a bunch more and bring them in, and of course there's a ramp time there.
I see. Okay.
So I'm not sure the 11x is quite as dramatic as it sounds, because I think that includes, you've got a lot of ramp time going on for sellers.
Yeah.
But even last year we were at 8.9x the delta, right? So these numbers are huge, and the year before that was 6.
Bang on 10 now. 10x.
Well, exactly, something like that, right? So you're back to your 10x.
Yeah.
So I think there's a number of reasons for that. I think, first of all, top performers have got a skill set that others just don't. They're able to smell out the right opportunities.
So is this a gut thing, or does it boil down to previous training? Where does this come from?
I think training is definitely a part of it, and I believe that let's start with the principle that when I was an individual contributor, the reason I was always the top performer wasn't because I was more talented than anybody else. I just worked harder. I made more calls. I had more meetings. I spent more time in front of our customers.
Right.
And so the top performers are good at that. But if we start, probably a nice way of thinking about it is if we start very top of funnel and work our way through. So top performers are nearly 3 times more likely to generate their own opportunities. Okay, so they're out in the market, they're generating their own leads, not necessarily exclusively. I'm sure they're working the inbounds that are coming in as well, but they're also active in the market. They're building relationships with people that aren't even in a sales process yet, and they're nearly 3 times more likely to generate their own opportunities at top of funnel. Then when we look at qualification, they are 3 times more likely to, or they get the data point right. Top performers are, I should have brought my data with me.
I think I've got the reports. Which one are we looking at?
Looking at, don't worry, I'll that's fine.
We can share. We can include the report in the show details as well.
So what we find is that top performers are 3 times more likely to qualify out opportunities at the discovery phase. Okay.
Qualify out.
Okay. So closing lost deals is a key skill for the top performers. What do we know? What we know, roughly speaking, in kind of round numbers, we know that roughly half of deals close without a decision being made. Okay. And then another half of the deals close lost. So 3/4 of the opportunities that we work on don't end in a positive outcome.
Yeah.
Okay. We also know that our sellers are spending twice as long on opportunities that close lost than deals that close won.
Yeah.
All right. So when you put all that together, we find ourselves in a place where, on average, our sellers are spending less than 15% of their time on revenue generating activities.
Wow.
Okay. So there's so much inefficiency in our go-to-market motion. There's so much inefficiency in the way we're operating. And ultimately, as leaders, we're responsible for that.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we need to do is help the sellers to close off to top of funnel. We need to help them to build that muscle to generate their own opportunities. Then we need to help them build the muscle of closing deals off as lost sooner.
Yeah.
And when you haven't got enough deals in your pipeline, that can be a challenge, or it can be counterintuitive. But as leaders, we need to show them, look, this is really important. We need to qualify out. And a lot of that comes down to ICP definition. Okay, so one of the things that a lot of our customers need to focus on initially in that first phase when we first roll out is it becomes really clear that everyone has a different definition of ICP.
Yeah. Do you mean everyone within the same organization?
Within the same organization.
Oh, that's a problem.
Yeah, a real problem, right? And if you ask your sellers, your marketeers, your customer success team what your ICP looks like, and if you don't get the same answer, you've got a problem.
Yeah.
And you've got to start there. We've got to get everyone singing from the same hymn sheet. And ultimately, that's what a CRO is there for, right? And that's probably, in my mind, the biggest differentiator between a VP of sales and a CRO. A VP of sales has one job to do, which is to generate the maximum amount of revenue they're allowed to. Okay. While a CRO is much more interested in generating profitable deals. Lifetime value matters to CROs. Selling to the right customers that perhaps you've got a land and expand motion.
Yep.
Okay. That matters more to a CRO than it does to a VP sales. Because a VP sales just cares about getting the first deal over the line. Yep. Right. The CROs are thinking about lifetime value. They're thinking about the types of customers that are going to give them the right case studies, that are going to stay with them for a long time, that they're going to be able to cross-sell, upsell to. So you need someone ultimately responsible for revenue that's going to bring together the messaging and marketing that makes sure that the sellers are selling to the right ICP and that the customer success team are doing the right thing with the customers once they've been onboarded.
Yeah. There was something else in the report, which this is a good segue to it. There was a section on expansion versus new business.
Yeah.
I have always maintained there's a great saying in SaaS that your best customers are your existing customers. And I always feel this historically has been somewhat ignored, and maybe it's very much a subject to the sort of macro environment we've found ourselves in for the last decade or so, with lots of venture money, as you mentioned earlier, floating around. The temptation is always there to hire more AEs and focus on the new logos, and I kind of feel like existing business was somewhat neglected. And from what I'm seeing in your latest report, that is not the case now. And again, what I loved about it was that you're saying now, and it's quantifiable, that expansion is 2.5 times easier than landing new business.
Yeah, well, first of all, we can see that 52% of new revenue last year didn't come from new logos. It came from existing accounts.
Yeah.
Okay. And as you rightly said, what's really interesting when you start diving into that is, and for the first time this year, we focused on not just the left-hand side of the bow tie, but also the right.
Yes.
Okay. And looking at that data was fascinating. So one of the things we found, and again, is the relationships are still driving revenue once the customers have signed up. So making sure that the success team are maintaining good levels of engagement with the customers is vital. And so, for example, if the last 2 QBRs you've done before the renewal are at C level, you're 7 times more likely to open a cross-sell, upsell opportunity with a 45% win rate.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
If the last 2 QBRs before the renewal are done below the C-suite, you're 4 times more likely to churn the customer. Okay. So it shows you how important those relationships are, and the QBRs need to be a strategic session. If your QBRs are being done around, the buttons aren't working, or can we get some more training or whatever, that's not a QBR.
No.
And if you go down that tactical route, even if you get a C-suite to attend the QBR, they won't come to the next one. Okay. And so a good test as to whether your QBRs are strategic is whether the C-suite continue to come to those sessions.
Love it.
And so that's really important in your success motion.
And I think you make a great point here, guys. Not just about having the relationship, but actually delivering value, right? So not focusing on the features, the buttons, to use your words, but more on what is the impact on the business, right?
Yeah. And what do they need to do next to get more value?
Yeah.
Okay. Thinking strategically, helping the board, what's driving the board right now. And there's different things driving different types of boards. Some it's all about growth at all cost. Others it's about EBITDA. So understanding what their drivers are and then helping them to achieve those goals means that you're going to be front of mind. You're going to be, they're going to want to attend the next QBR because you're going to add value and help them run faster.
Yeah. Can I take you back to something you said earlier, which was the idea that reps who are generating their own pipeline, I think you mentioned the best performing reps generate 3 times as much pipeline, 3 times self-generated pipeline is 3 times higher. So one of the other things in the report that kind of ties this really nicely was that we're seeing a return of the full stack sales professional, right? So we kind of, again, going back to this unbundling and consolidation idea on a more macro level, we went through a period where, again, maybe very much due to all the money that was kind of operating around the venture environment, we had a period where everyone was hiring an army of SDRs. They were expected to generate pipeline, and then the AEs were just taking orders and booking. And now we're seeing a big reversal of this trend. I can't remember the exact numbers, but this is 2 reports now in a row where we're seeing a continuous growth in what I call full stack. I guess you might use a slightly different term, but the idea...
Full cycle, yeah.
Full cycle. We used to, by the way, we call it full stack because when it was a Stack Overflow, and this goes some 15 years ago now, maybe, we had at the time a full stack sales team, which was not the trend at the time. Everyone was kind of unbundling and hiring SDRs, and we basically chose for a very long time to stay with a full stack team. Why do you think we're seeing that return? One explanation I had obviously is there's less venture money, so the quote from 2023, you have to do more with less. But I think the point you're making is that there's another reason behind this, right? In terms of effectiveness and reps actually performing better.
Yeah, look, I think most go-to-market teams have been bloated for a while, and there's a lot of inefficiencies within those teams, and there's a lot of spend being on some really expensive resources that have been underperforming. But exactly that, we could spend a lot of time talking about, a year or 2 ago, it was how do we get our B players up to A player standard? Yeah. Now it's, look, if you've ramped them and they're still a B player, they don't have a right to be in the business. And there is that
the consensus across the board now?
What we're seeing is that, why can't we just make our A players busier? Can we get them back-to-back meetings? How many hours a day are they spending in front of customers? How can we take away their admin? How can we give them support so that they are spending more of their time doing the things that only they can do well? And actually, I think if we are all honest with ourselves, our sellers could be busier.
Yeah.
And if they could be busier, then you've got too many of them.
So does this then mean reallocating resources from headcount on B players towards increasing efficiency for your A players?
It's all about efficiency now. So, and we can talk a lot more about efficiency because it's a big part of my something I'm very enthusiastic about. But coming back to your question, what we're seeing is that it's not about the sales process anymore. It's about the buyer's journey. And as a buyer, I'm going to spend a lot of my own time. I'm going to go down that sales process or that buying journey on my own. More than I ever have done before. But when I do start to engaging with the company, with the business I want to engage with, or the product I'm interested in, I want the best possible experience I can get. And as a buyer, I don't care if I'm in a marketing cadence, or if I've made it to the SDR function, or if I'm now talking to an AE, or whether I'm part of an implementation team or an onboarding team or an activation team or a CS function. It doesn't matter to me. As far as I'm concerned, I just want value. I just want to see the outcome. And as a buyer, I want to be able to trust my partner, my supplier, that they're going to deliver me that value. And what we find is consistently is that when sellers, when a buyer is handed from one team to the next, things fall down.
Yeah.
And people can fall, and issues can fall through the cracks. And so the buyer wants to have confidence that they're with the right company, and the opportunity to build that relationship with one person through that whole customer lifecycle means that we don't have that problem of handing a customer from one department to the next.
Yeah. And what about then, so does this, you mentioned the bow tie earlier, does this translate to the other side of the bow tie as well? Or what I'm asking, I guess, is, are we seeing the same people managing accounts moving forward as well? So is the sales team being kind of merged into the account executive team as well? Or?
Look, we've seen there's lots of different businesses doing it in different ways.
Yeah.
But I think if you think of it through the lens of the buyer, what do they want? Well, at the point they've signed a contract, they've trusted that seller enough for them to commit. Right, they're spending money. They've signed a contract. They've managed to commit. It seems crazy
for
that
them to just check out.
Yeah. We spent however many months building this great relationship. You trust me enough to sign a contract. I'm now going to leave you to it. Right?
Yeah. Good luck.
Exactly. Good luck. See you later. And that's where we were before. I think at the same time, we've got to be sensitive to the fact that sellers need to sell. So what we've found is that having that consistent relationship from a commercial perspective makes a lot of sense. Now, as the seller, I still need a success team to do the implementation, to do the activation, to manage the account from a day-to-day perspective. But allowing the seller to continue to have that relationship from a commercial side does a couple of things. First of all, it gives the customer that consistent experience, but moreover, it allows the seller to land and expand. So rather than having to get the whole deal first time, otherwise I don't get paid on the upsell. Now all of a sudden I can, and we can see it in the data. The sales processes I think are 18% shorter when the seller continues through that, is part of that whole cycle.
Wow.
And so the buyers get a much more consistent experience, and the seller gets to sell them something because they know that they've got another 12 months to owning this account where they can continue to cross-sell, upsell. And it all tends to happen in that first 6, 9, 12 months.
Yeah, so it's a win-win.
It's a win-win for both sides, exactly. But at the same time, we've got to be careful not to leave our sellers just farming our existing accounts.
Yeah,
we need them out there winning new logos. So it's a fine balance. And Success has got an amazing role to play in doing the heavy lifting,
of course,
and bringing the commercial leader into that conversation at the right time. Maybe sitting in on the QBRs, and certainly involved in the renewals and the cross-sell discussions.
What is the role of AI in all of this? We touched upon it briefly earlier, but I kind of want us to bring us back to this. There was a data point in the report which I thought was pretty interesting, which was that sellers who use AI are 2x more effective. How do we measure this effectiveness? And what does it actually mean that they're two times more effective? Is it they generate 2x more revenue, or is it a different measure of
It's efficiency. Okay, so efficiency is, again, back down to dollars per day.
Yeah.
Okay, and their opportunities. So I think the way I'd look at this is, what are we trying to achieve? We want to achieve consistency, right? So we let's assume we've got product market fit. Maybe 20% of our sellers are consistently hitting quota. So we know that the market wants what we're selling. Okay, and so what we're trying to achieve is consistency across the board. We want everybody following best practice. Okay, and so that to achieve that level of consistency, AI has a role to play in taking away anything that's going to distract the sellers. And we've got to be careful because AI itself can become the distraction,
Right.
right? And a great way of measuring that is how many hours a day on average are they spending customer facing, talking to prospects, talking to customers. And you can see from the data that the average players are spending 2 hours a day customer facing. The top performers are nearly at 50% of their day.
And would you attribute this to top performers leveraging AI to give themselves more time? Okay.
Definitely part of it, yeah. So
how do we define AI here? Is it just a matter of using ChatGPT to polish your emails, or are we talking about more sophisticated workflows like leveraging Clay maybe or N8N? What are we talking? What is AI in this context?
Well, I think it depends on the go-to-market motion and the maturity of the business. And yes, I think the reality is that the vast majority of sellers are really only using ChatGPT to kind of clean up an email here and there. I think there's a big opportunity, and we've recently introduced AI into Ebsta.
Yeah.
And of course, I've got visibility of the roadmap now that we're on with Fullcast as to what that looks like, and AI's front and center in what go-to-market is going to look like in 3 years, and we can talk a bit more about that.
I'd love to hear more. Yeah, if you're happy to share, I'd love to hear how you're implementing it.
Well, inside Ebsta, one of the areas that we see can have a big impact on productivity and on more sellers hitting quota is around qualification. Okay, so a lot of the, shall we call them the B players, they skip through that qualification stage far too quickly. Okay, because they want to see progress, they want to move forward in the sales process. And when we look at the data, you see those sellers are. When we go into an organization, you might find a certain set of sellers who have got an unusually high amount of deals closing lost at late stage.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And we think we've got a late stage sales cycle problem.
Yep.
Okay. What we've been able to build is an engine that can take things like your maybe you're using Gong for your call recordings. We can take those call recordings from the last 12 months and go back and look at how well or badly they were qualifying customers in every deal that they've worked on in the last year or two.
Yeah.
Okay.
And is this, Guy, just to ask you about this, is this the way you do it? Are you dogmatic about how you define good or bad qualification, or is this something? Is this an input that you can take from each customer depending on how they qualify it? Absolutely.
So every customer's got their own qualification methodology. There's the usual ones, the BANTs, the med picks, and so on. And in a general rule, from what we've seen in the data, it doesn't really matter which one you use.
Okay.
What matters is that you have something, and ultimately, the simpler the better in general.
Yeah.
Okay. But we still need to know who the economic buyer is. We still need to know that there's a critical event. We still need to know that they've got a budget and all the usual things. So we make it very easy for the customer to train the AI on whatever their methodology is. As you can imagine, we've got nearly 300 customers now, so we've done it quite a lot.
Yeah.
But they're able to tweak and evolve the AI bots, the agents that do the analysis. But the beautiful thing is being able to analyze 1,000 hours of calls for the last 1,000 deals, and look back at the way that deals were qualified and score that qualification. And suddenly now the seller's not involved in that process. And if you think about it, the skill set required to know how to qualify correctly is very different to the skill set required to record that information in the system of record.
Got you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so we need to teach our sellers how to qualify correctly. What we don't need to do is worry about getting them to put it into the system consistently, because frankly, they're never going to do. Okay. Because maybe they'll, even if they're the best and diligent at recording their information, they're probably really busy moving from one meeting to the next, and things are going to get missed. Some are going to over-egg their position, others are going to sandbag their position, and you just don't get that level of consistency.
Yeah.
What AI is very good at is consistency. Okay, so extracting out the med pick from the qualification calls for the last 1,000 deals, and then scoring how well or badly they've qualified different parts of that process, and then comparing that to when we're losing out on those opportunities.
Yeah.
And you start to see patterns really, really quickly.
Yeah, and with the role of AI in the qualification process, so is it just a matter of extracting it and scoring it, or is it also, does it have a more proactive role to play in terms of nudging people perhaps to ask the right questions so you can even get the data? Do you know what I mean? Because if you don't know the questions to ask or don't ask them, you gloss over them, then that data would never be captured and subsequently it won't be analyzed and put into the system. So
yeah, I've gone down that road. And because that's the logical next step, right?
Yeah.
And it didn't work for us. Okay.
Yeah.
So what we found is just adjacent to that. Okay. So when you've got an AI engine scoring your qualification at the end of every sales call, we're able to deliver a green thumbs up or a red thumbs down as to whether you qualified enough to leave the stage.
Oh, I see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, all of a sudden, as a seller, I've gone on the course. I know what qualification is all about, but now I can see consistent. The last 3 meetings I've had, I'm getting a red thumbs down. I need to go back and qualify further with the customer.
Right.
And as a seller, I'm going to take that on board. We will almost gamify it, and then I'm going to make sure I'm better. I'm going to try and get that green thumbs up at the end of my qualification call.
Yeah.
And just by doing it in that simple format, you see the sellers taking responsibility for their own learning and their own change. So we need to gamify the process rather than sit sellers in classrooms. Let them come and gather. We can support them and help them to get more of those green thumbs up. But it has to come from them. And again, we know that sellers are difficult to train.
Yeah.
And taking a classroom approach to this doesn't seem to work. You can train people up so much, but then it needs to come from the field, and they need to understand that their last call could have been better, and here's how it could have been better.
Yeah.
And then if we're strong about the gates and triggers from moving from one stage to the next, then suddenly they start to understand why you're asking them to make that change.
Yeah.
Because if you qualify further and better, we're able to take that deal. We can close it off as lost sooner, which means we've got more capacity to do other things. Or if we qualify them better, we're much more likely to have a positive outcome in stage 4 or 5.
Yeah. Yeah. Are we allowed to talk about the upcoming reports? I'm sure. So you said you were releasing it at
the GTM event the Pavilion GTM event in DC.
End of this month.
In 2 weeks. Yeah.
In 2 weeks. So I think this would air probably right about then. So maybe if you are happy, you can tease up a few things. Or is there anything else from this report that we have not touched upon? Something that people, I want to say people, I'm thinking revenue leaders and CEOs, and of course individual contributors should be aware of, and they must know. Is there anything that we left off the table?
There's a lot. So ICP is a big focus now. Okay.
Yeah.
And what proportion of your pipeline it matches ICP is a key question that people should be asking. Do we understand what ICP looks like in different markets, in different geographies, in different motions, different products that we're selling? So we spent a lot of time looking at ICP. I think if you can get north of a third of your pipeline matching ICP, you're in a good place compared to most. But finding ways of progressing that and moving that in the right direction is absolutely key. Do
you have a sense of what the delta is between top performance and everyone else in terms of percentage of pipeline matching ICP?
Yeah, twice as high. The top performers have got twice as much pipeline that match ICP than the average performers.
And what would be the rough percentage? So
about, again, I'm not going to give you the number yet.
Okay. All right.
But it's north of 50%. North of 50% of their opportunities match ICP, and they're ruthless about qualifying out. And that's what we see. And they're also a lot more agile. When you look at the opportunity, the size and shape and the deal and the products they were going to sell them in kind of those early stages, it changes by the time they close the deal. Might change up, might change down, but it changes with the top performers. They're a lot more agile and a lot more open to listening to what the customer needs are. While the B players are, they get in their mind they want to sell X, and then at the end of it, exactly, they get happy as all the way through, and then the customer either buys X or they don't.
Right. Okay, sorry, I interrupted you. So you said ICP, percentage of ICP was a key thing.
Yeah, and ICP definition is you've got to get it right. Again, it's like the data piece we talked about earlier. We built this engine that scores engagement so that we understand the relationships the customers have, and that was really hard. And it's not the most exciting part of the product, right? Having your forecast presented to you in a nice graphic, that looks fantastic. But or understanding the signals that you need to work on, or the best next action or opportunity, that these are really nice dashboards that people enjoy in our product. But all of that only comes because we fixed the data first.
Right.
We've defined, what good looks like from a relationship perspective, and we're scoring engagement, and we're monitoring that as we go through our sales cycles. Yeah. So these things you've got to be on top of those, the boring stuff to move it forward.
Yeah. Is there anything else? I know we've covered a ton of things here, but any other data points that we should be focusing on before we wrap it up?
Yeah. Again, Think about the influence of time on win rates. Okay, so understand, where are we spending most of our time in our sales cycle? Is there a certain stage that a lot of deals get stuck? Are we, and what's the influence of that? What happens when deals slip? What happens when we get stuck in a certain stage, when we can't progress an opportunity? What happens to our win rates? Because again, we see time and again organizations where they might have dozens and dozens of deals that have been in stage for far too long. When we analyze the data, we can show them that, look, you've got like a win rate of 4% on deals that have been in stage for this long, but you've got 100 of them.
Yeah.
What are you doing, right? These deals, let's close them off as lost. Let's free up our salespeople's time and focus on something more productive.
Yeah.
So understanding the influence of time on deals, it's not the same for everyone, and it's also not the same in different for size of deals. So slippage on enterprise deals has almost no effect because enterprise deals just take a while to get through. So understanding the influence of slippage on win rates is key. Understanding is another key point. And then again, we focused on which personas are having the biggest influence on outcomes.
Yeah.
And you won't be surprised to hear that the finance persona is now absolutely key to the sales cycle. And again, the win rates are twice as high if we can bring the finance persona involved and get them involved in building the business case in the first place versus just presenting back the business case to the finance persona.
Yeah.
So find out what stakeholders are having the biggest impact, bring them in early, get them on board with the process, and also give them an off ramp. Maybe this isn't the right time for you now. Tell me about the other 7 projects you've got on right now, and what outcomes can you achieve from those projects? Is the project that we're talking about going to have a bigger impact or a smaller impact? Because if it's smaller, let's hold off. Let's not waste each other's time.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And also use the structure, use the sales process to deal with the objections. If the customer won't give you access to the finance persona, don't progress with the sales process.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I'm really sorry. I'd love to go through this exercise with you. Of course, I'd love to give you access to our solution engineers, and I'd spend more time giving you demos and so on. Unfortunately, I'm just not allowed to. If you can't give me access to the finance persona, I'm going to have to move on.
Yeah.
And when you're ready, we can come back to this. But I'm just not allowed to progress through this process. I can't leave stage 2 unless I've got that persona engaged.
Do you think this is an effective way of actually sifting out through who's serious about actually buying and who's just there to window shop, so to speak?
Absolutely, yeah. One of the other things we looked at for the larger businesses is the influence of a RFP. Mm-hmm. And again, you wouldn't be surprised to hear that if you're not involved in defining the RFP, you probably shouldn't bid for it. Because the chances are, more often than not, they already know who the supplier is.
Based on someone else, and it's just going through emotions.
Exactly.
That's really cool.
Yeah, we see that a lot as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Look, I just to finish off, I kind of want to zoom out one last time and go back to kind of the crazy things that are happening in the GTM space at the moment. If we are sat here again saying, I don't know, 5 years, what does the GTM space look like? Obviously, you said the way you're selling today is going to look very, very different in 2026. So maybe even, forget 5 years, maybe in 2 years' time. What does selling and the broader GTM space look like in 5 years, based on what you're seeing?
AI agents are going to run GTM for us in a lot of ways. Okay, so we spent a lot of time and energy building beautiful dashboards that articulate really easy to understand outcomes. Those are quite brittle. They operate in a certain way. There are certain filters that you can use to change and evolve your dashboards, but they are what they are. The future of go-to-market, or the future of sales leadership, all those dashboards are going to be dynamic. Everything you want to know, getting your data lake right is absolutely key, right? And again, I know it's boring, but we've got to get a consistent approach to capturing the data in a format that we can then use. Then using that to deliver the right insights that we need to the right person at the right time. And so it doesn't matter when whether you're in your email or on LinkedIn or in your CRM or wherever you are, you should be able to understand what the best next action is based on what you've gone through. I think CRM is going to be unrecognizable between today and 3 years' time.
Wow.
From what I'm seeing, Salesforce is becoming more of a data repository than anything else. And you've got all these, which is great. It's fine. It's where you can push everything into and then extract it out and put it elsewhere. But it's a very expensive data repository. And I think we're going to see a lot of change in the way that in what we spend our money on. And I think CRM is the old way of doing things.
So you've opened an interesting bracket here. So are we saying CRM as a category is going to disappear, and you'll be working directly from, say, the data warehouse and whatever other software you're running, or where data lives, consolidating everything into a single source of truth, say, a Fullcast, or you name it. Is that kind of where we're going, or are we saying there's going to be a new breed of CRMs, like an AI native CRM? Where we're kind of headed?
So I think data is going to be key. So, building up your data lake, finding ways of structuring your unstructured data. If you've still got your data in silos of mailboxes, calendars, phone systems, CRM, ERP systems, and so on, you need a consistent approach. You need one place that the data can sit, and then all of these disparate applications that you want to use can lean into that. So I think we'll find there'll be more efficient ways of building that data lake and structuring the data. I think we'll see insights surface from that, and then AI agents will sit on top of that as well. So we'll be able to interrogate the data and get to that best next action a lot quicker. And frankly, it shouldn't matter what front end you want to use, right? As a seller, if I want to use Salesforce or HubSpot or Fullcast or Ebsta, it doesn't matter. It shouldn't make a difference. The data should be consistent across the board, and I should be able to use whatever front end I want on that data. So I think we're going to see a massive shift. I think people are going to start to wake up to the fact they're spending an absolute fortune on CRM and not getting a huge amount of value from it. And I think we're going to see, the growth of single revenue platforms that cover everything from setting your territories all the way through to forecasting, pipeline inspections, through to pay and bill, and commissions.
Well, I hope that is indeed the case, and we will, I guess, find out in a couple of years. But thanks so much for joining me today, Guy. Where can listeners follow you? Ebsta, I guess now Fullcast. What's the best way to keep up with all the amazing data that you shared?
So you can download the report itself. I think when we will include a link here. So we'll give you a way of getting access to the latest reports. Once you're subscribed, you'll get alert to the reports as they come. You're welcome. I post about a lot of this on LinkedIn. So if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, that would be great. If you mention the podcast, if you want to connect with me, if you mention the podcast, I'll certainly accept the invite. Listen, as I said before, it's a really exciting time for go-to-market. None of us have ever sold in 2026 before, and we're about to figure out what that looks like. And it's up to us as leaders to sculpt the future of go-to-market. And I've never been more excited.
Amazing. Guy, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure, as always.
Thank you.